Hello and welcome back to the Chase Joy podcast. I am your host, Flor, and today I'm super excited because this is going to be the first podcast that has a guest. And I brought you guys my good friend, Gina, and we'll go over her story. But before we get there, I just want to give you guys an update on what's been going on in my life this week. It was my birthday, so I'm 37 now. I have a lot of gray hairs. But it was a really good birthday. I have mentioned in previous episodes how there was a situation at one point where my birthday was not the best thing. I did not want to feel celebrated, but I have been praying and God really gave me the best birthday that I've had in a really long time. My friends, my family, my coworkers, everybody made it a special day. So super proud of how everything came around and just that I have good people in my life. So that was on Thursday, on April 4th. And we still celebrated a little bit more on Friday, had my family over for some cake. And yeah, it was a good week. There's also an update on the podcast that's been on my mind. And actually, I had been talking about it with Gina. I talked about it with my husband about how often I'm going to be doing these episodes. I think because of the fact that I am a mom, I am a wife, I work, and I am like a one-man show. I want to put quality stuff out here, good content that's going to speak to you and that's going to bless you. And to do that and to also not put everything else that I have on my life to the side. I think I'm going to go to an episode every other week for now until we figure out a better way to do it. And the other thing I have thought about is maybe doing shorter episodes here and there. If I feel inspired and I want to get something out here, I might just throw in a 15-20 minute episode if I feel that God is really calling me to put that message out there. So that is the latest on the podcast. But yeah, I'm super excited to have Gina. So Gina and I actually met years ago, right? Do you remember?
Yes.
This was in my early 20s during my crazy years. She probably does not know any of the crazy years of that time, but yeah, that was a long time ago. And we reconnected because we were building a home and we were going through the same things, right? Process of building a home and all of the craziness that comes with that. I remember she messaged me and she was like, "You remember me, right? We worked here, right? You remember?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." Like, hold on, let me zoom in on the profile photo. And then God works in just amazing ways because we connect on Instagram and then I realized that she goes to the same church as I do. And then before we know it, we both signed up for this small group that I've mentioned on the podcast before called Rooted. So now we go to Rooted together every Tuesday. It's what? 2 more weeks? This week and next week, right?
2 more weeks left. Yeah. And we didn't sign up together. We saw each other there and we're like,
hey. But prior to that, I was like, hey, you know what? Let's hang out. Let's go have coffee. So we went to go have coffee. And of course, we chatted for the entire day before we knew it.
We were going to have breakfast and coffee.
Yeah.
And we just had coffee for 4 hours.
For 4 hours. So we were there for forever. And I still remember my husband's like, "Are you still there? You still got to go pick up the kids." I'm like, "Oh, yes. Okay. Leaving. Okay. Bye." But yeah, so we always have something to talk about. I really enjoyed having Gina in my life and really thankful for you. But I want to open up the conversation. We'll see how this goes. And I think she has a lot of stuff that she can share with us about her life and about her journey to getting to know God. I have been very open about my testimony, and I'm sure you'll agree that sharing your testimony is just not only empowering for you, but it just helps other people to realize that they're not alone. Because sometimes you may not relate to my story, but you may relate to hers or you may relate to somebody else's. But knowing how people come out of those situations and how God helps you and how God can save you from those situations, regardless of your past, it's just really great to hear somebody's testimonies. I'm going to open it up with, tell me a little bit about who you are.
First of all, my name is Gina. I am going to be 44 years old. That's hard for it to sink in. I can't believe I'm 44 in a few months. And I have 4 kids with my husband. We are a blended family. And I am also a grandma. That's the other shocker.
You're a cool grandma.
A cool grandma, yeah. What do they say? Grandma. I'm not really glamorous, right? But I'm a grandma, which it's a different feeling. It's when you become a grandma. All those things that people say, facts.
Yeah.
Very, very true. But let me take you a little bit back to before I became a blended family and why I'm a blended family. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I actually became a teen mom at the age of 18. I found out I was pregnant, and actually a little bit before my 18th birthday. And this was somebody that I knew almost my whole life because his mom used to take care of me and my sisters at her daycare. So it's somebody that I was familiar with, the family, and I actually connected with this person my senior year in high school. You could say it was like the high school type of crush, little crush that I've had on this person. And my mom was very against me having any type of relationship with this person.
And I'm sure like now as a mom, realize like how those gut feelings of a mom are always like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah. And I grew up, I want to say, though me being a teen mom, I was a good girl. I was the type of girl that I can't do that. My mom's going to be so mad. She's going to be disappointed. Why would I even think about doing things like that?
Yeah.
So nothing to do with experimenting with like that was never me. Till this day, of almost 44 years old, I'm the scaredy cat person.
Yeah.
Like it.
You're like me.
I'm scared of a needle.
Yeah.
At the doctor's office. Like that's me. So I grew up a Catholic, like most people here in the Valley, where you go to church on Sundays, you sit down, you probably go to catechist classes. So that's where my scaredy cat and following the rules, and mom's gonna be disappointed. And growing up also in a divorced household. My parents got divorced when I was 9. I always felt like I needed to be that example for my sisters and be a good example for my mom. But my senior year of high school just kind of like let me go into this world of curiosity. And not in the curiosity of doing drugs or anything like that, but I'm here with this person that I've had a crush on all this time, and I messed, with the sense of you need to wait till you get married, right? That was my mom always preaching that to me, especially because, going to church, that was instilled in me from the very beginning. That totally went out the window. My senior year, I actually had already graduated high school. I had enrolled at Pan Am, which is now UTRGV here locally for us. And I find out a few months after I had graduated that I was pregnant. I was throwing up. I wasn't feeling good. I didn't know what to do, to be honest with you. I confided in one of my cousins. She's about 4 years older than me. And I was like, I'm pregnant. I took a test, but I'm freaking out.
Do you remember how it felt, the idea of how am I going to tell my mom?
Yes. That's the part that I reached out to my older cousin and I needed her help.
Yeah.
I didn't know. And like I said, I grew up Catholic, but I didn't, to be honest with you, at that time to say, God, help me. What am I going to do? It was more like, let me see who I can call.
Right.
But I knew there was a God. I always knew Jesus. I knew there was that because I grew up in that environment. Every Sunday, on Wednesdays I'd go to catechism, Saturdays sometimes. To me, growing up Catholic was like a routine.
Yeah.
And there was
it was just something you did.
Yeah, something I did, and things that were instilled in me because of my mom and the church. And this is what you do and what you don't do, right? But there was never anything that was taught to me that I can go back and remember. You have that conversation with God, like you can talk to God. No, it was more like you're going to go confess your sins, and then you're going to say all these Hail Marys and Our Fathers.
I think for me, I also felt like having a conversation with God was weird because I saw God as, how do I say it, a power that was going to punish me for the things that I had done. So why would I go to him? I feel that was my mindset, especially as I was younger, because I grew up very much like you, Catholic. We went to church, we confessed our sins, things like that, but never felt like I could just go to God directly and talk to him and take him through my day and go to him when I had an issue, right? We would search for who else is going to help us, thinking that our tia or cousin or whatever is going to help us and have all the solutions, when really we realize that's not the case. And I think even now, knowing God, I think sometimes it's easy to fall into the trap of reaching for example, to our spouse and going to our spouse with a problem instead of going to God first, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a thing that we can get used to. But I think the lesson there is that really God is there to help us. He may not be the one that vocally is going to tell you your answer, but he will guide you and lead you in the right way.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's something that I've learned now throughout that time. I just didn't know. And I want to say I felt the same way how you're saying, I'm going to have to go confess.
Yeah.
And what I felt shame in is, how am I going to tell this to a priest of what I just did?
Yeah.
To me, that was one, my mom, that was already scary enough. And then how could I go and tell somebody else? What are people going to think about me?
So you grew up also in a Mexican household?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say semi.
Okay. Do you
grew
feel
up-
they ever spoke to you about sex and
No.
it was a taboo topic?
Yeah, it was a taboo topic. It was more of, you just don't do it till you get married. When you get married, that's when you're going to,
Like the rule is this
Yes.
and that's it, right?
Yes.
That's as much as we talk about it.
but I knew of it.
Right.
And there was conversation around. My mom probably shielded me, like if there was adult conversation, get away. You can't hear this.
Go to the other room.
Go to the other room.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is not for you.
Yeah.
And I was already probably old enough to understand
Right.
all these things. You have friends that are other teen moms at
Yeah.
14, 15 with kids.
Knowing what you went through now and then having kids that obviously went through their teenage years or still in their teenage years, do you feel more open to having those conversations with them?
Yes, semi, because I have 2 older boys. I didn't mention that, right? 2 boys and then 2 girls, one biologically and then my bonus daughter. And with the boys, luckily, I can't speak to see if their dad had those conversations. I'm not aware. I never asked them. But I know my husband did. And I thank him for that. And with my daughter, I had that conversation with her.
Yeah.
And she knew that she could come to me. That's where I feel a sense of peace, that I know if she's going through something,
She
she
can
knows
come to
I'm
you
her
about it.
mom, but I'm also her friend, in the sense I'm going to give you the best advice as a friend versus you going with someone else.
So then you go back to, okay, you find out you're pregnant, you go to your cousin.
Yes, I go with my cousin who's older, who also had just became a teen mom a couple years before this happened. And she went through the whole situation too. But her parents were more accepting. Her dad and my mom are our brother and sister. And I thought at that time, and my mom at that point was already remarried with someone else. I wasn't going with my mom and dad to tell them I was pregnant. I was going with my mom and my stepdad to tell them I was pregnant. And here I'm 17 years old, about to turn 18 in a few weeks. I think it was that summer. I can't remember the specific month, but I was about to turn 18. And she goes with me, and I tell her, and I never expected. I felt like she was going to be disappointed and mad, but I never thought my mom would call me every name in the book.
Wow.
Not just her, my stepdad. Very disappointed. And they kicked me out.
Wow.
Where do I go?
Yeah.
My cousin lived in Bronzeville, and luckily I had my own car at that time. So the kid's dad wasn't here when I'm breaking this news. So you could just imagine my mom telling me all these things and then telling me he just used you, and she knows this family. She was comparing what she knew of the family with my situation at that time. And I was engaged, to be honest with you, at that point.
Wow.
So when she was never approving, he had already asked me to be his wife before I found out I was pregnant, but he wasn't here. He was out of the state working.
So mom knew that you were engaged?
Yeah.
She approved of that? She did not approve of that either.
No, she
Okay.
it was already not a good situation.
Yeah.
And then me coming and telling her
Yeah, I'm pregnant.
I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
That was
The cherry on top.
Yeah, cherry on top. Once she wasn't approving of the marriage or me getting engaged, mind you, at 17.
Yeah.
But I said, I'm going to do it on my own. I
Yeah.
don't remember the words, but I do remember how I felt. The feeling is never going to go away.
Right.
Have I surpassed that and how I feel? Yeah, that's why I'm good to share the stories of my past and what I went through, because it's something that I guess with the relationship with God and knowing that He forgives us, I didn't need the forgiveness from my mom or anybody else. It was more of Him and the disappointment. But what I was feeling at that time, it was the shame.
And that's what I was about to say, that I mentioned in a previous episode. God is not there to shame you or to make you feel guilty. That comes from the enemy. Those are the things that we get told by the enemy in our head, that we feel this way and we're not worthy and we're not good or we made a mistake. And this is going to be your life now, or those things that whenever we go through any situation that's hard, because the enemy wants us to run away from God, not go toward God. And the good thing is that we know that God removes that shame. I think for anybody that's trying to get closer to God, whatever your past is, whatever you've been through, he will help you get rid of the shame and the guilt and those negative things from whatever you've been through, and he will give you his grace and mercy. Right? It's undeserved, but he gives it freely. Right?
That's very true. And at that time, especially if you don't have that relationship, you don't know, and you think it's people, right? You don't know that it's the enemy. I'll never forget that day. My mom kicked me out. I left. I called the kid's dad and told him the situation. I'm here crying. This was in the 90s, you guys. So I was at a payphone. There was no cell phone. I find a payphone, raining outside, make a phone call, and he tells me to go to his mom. So he was going to call his mom and explain the situation. And they're opposite of what my mom told me and experienced to his mom. His mom was overjoyed, accepting, welcoming. She's always said she wanted me to be her daughter-in-law. She wanted me to marry him. She's always been overjoyed with who I am, and because she's known of my values, and she went with him to pick out my engagement ring. It was something that she was not disappointed or
opposite of your family.
Complete opposite. I move in. As I mentioned, he's working. I feel so uncomfortable. I'm in a house that's not mine, but I have my own space. I'm in his room, and later he's like, I'll be there in X amount of day. He's there the next day. We start living life together. My mom, no communication. I would tell you, fast forward 6 months probably, that my mom close to me delivering and is still adamant and wants me to get married now. How am I going to have a baby and not be married? That was her.
So stuck to the rules.
Stuck to the rules. I don't remember how many months I was pregnant, but she was basically adamant that I get married now, and that we hadn't even planned. I'm over here pregnant. I'm over here more worried about having this baby, and she's more worried about
how are you going to look in front of other people, do you think?
That's what I felt like.
Or how she's going to look?
I don't know if it was how she's going to look, but she was still in that mindset of, I'm disappointed, but now we can't do anything about it, but you can get married.
Right.
And now it's going to look okay that you're married.
And having a baby.
So it's not going to look as bad. That's the way I saw it. To be honest with you, I never had that conversation with her there. It was just her adamant about now getting married. Okay, you're going to have a baby. Can't do anything about it. And before that, because of how I felt, I actually went, I was working at a little office in McAllen, and I told my coworkers there, I confided in them that I was pregnant, and I was freaking out. I can't tell you that I was feeling I didn't want to have a baby. It wasn't that. It was just my mom telling me, you did something wrong. And I go and tell them this, and they go with me to Mexico. And it wasn't an abortion, but it was a pill for me to take. And you can probably say it's like the day after pill. So you don't have the baby, but it's already way after. It's too late. So I still go and do it.
Oh, wow.
Then I tell my mom what happened, and she takes me to the doctor, my regular family doctor. He's actually the one that delivered my first son. And they say everything's fine.
Like, you're how many months pregnant by now?
I don't even know. I want to say maybe when I went to Mexico, I was probably 2 months when I confided in them.
Wow.
Because I was already kicked out, but I was still confused. I didn't know what to do.
You were still in shock.
And I'll tell you why I was confused. Just wanted to give you that little situation there first. The reason I was confused, and I knew I was getting punished in every which way or form, because my kid's dad comes home. I'm still working. I'm still living life as normal as I could. And we're probably in his room. I think he has other siblings, and we're all watching movies in his room. And I didn't know what his lifestyle was. I knew he drank, but I didn't know the complete full story. And we're there watching TV, and something happens, and I don't know what triggers or what, and he chokes me.
Oh, wow.
And I freaked out. I'm crying, choking. His brother moves him like, what's wrong with you? And I didn't know he was on something. What he was on at that time, I don't know. But it wasn't him. I could tell you 100% it wasn't him. I hadn't seen him drinking at that time they were watching him because we were watching a movie. I don't know what triggered that. And his brother takes me somewhere. I remember that part because that was the first time. You'll never forget your first time. And then I leave with his brother till he cools down. Wow. Like that was the solution to the family.
Did it seem to you at that point that they had seen the side of him and knew what to do in a situation like that?
Yeah, little did I know, years after I found out that he lived with someone before for quite some time. Okay. And the reason they weren't together was because she had pressed charges against him. Again, I didn't know none of this because I saw him a different way. Right. I saw him from growing up and in school. Never did I think anything else. This was this person. Years later, I found out that he lived with somebody, that he was abusive with her. It was like
somebody you didn't even know.
Yeah, like who is that person?
Yeah.
Hence why I didn't want to have the baby.
Yeah.
And I was so confused. I didn't have anywhere to go but stay there because people would probably think, why didn't you leave?
Could you confide in anybody at this point? When that situation happened, did you feel, I'm just alone? I can't go to my parents, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I couldn't go. I just thought my mom's just going to tell me, I told you so, now let's see what you're going to do. Yeah. I played these things in my head.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And obviously, I couldn't confide with his mom or sisters, but they knew. And I thought they would be like, leave. But no, it was the opposite. Forgive him. He doesn't know, or...
Right.
He'll get over it. It's going to change.
They almost didn't see the severity of, or like the problem.
They didn't see the
problem.
They knew it was a problem, but I think it was something that they were probably used to.
Yeah. It becomes a norm
It becomes a norm. And that wasn't a norm to me. I grew up with my mom was tough. You see her now, there's nothing that's tough about it. Yeah. It's completely a different person now. And I love my mom. And I felt she raised me with tough love. And she'll tell you, I grew up fast. She was a single mom. When I was in that situation of my life, I didn't know where to go. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you that at that moment, because I grew up Catholic, I would go to this church, St. Jude, where they have the shrine of St. Jude and then of Jesus. And I would go turn on a candle. I would go say prayers there. It was like I had to go pray. Yeah. I can't tell you that right after that I would go to church. I would do any of that. That wasn't in our day-to-day. So I didn't have anywhere to go, and I thought this was a one-off. Okay, something happened, and then that's it. Little did I know that was going to be my life for the next 15 years. From choking to you name it, there was a lot of abuse. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have to do anything.
How was your mental health during this time? Do you feel you just accepted it as your life? Or were you constantly in a battle of, how do I get out of this? What goes through your head during times that are this tough, where you feel like you can't go to somebody or confide in other people, or you just feel helpless?
I can't tell you that I felt helpless. I have a very tough skin. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back to how I was raised and how I grew up. And I didn't start telling God, like, why me, until years after abuse. It was never like, poor me, why am I going through this? I could never confide in anybody. I was ashamed. Mm-hmm. I can tell you, not even my mom or my sisters, I couldn't tell them, hey, I'm getting beat up. Mm-hmm. Or anybody at work who are my coworkers or friends or people that I've established friendships with, because they were going to look at me and be like, why are you there? Mm-hmm. Or why are you putting up with that? I was ashamed of what, again, people were going to say. Yeah. And so I just held it. I went to one of my high school friends' baby shower, and I think my son was probably 1 at that time. Bridal shower, not baby shower. She was about to get married, and I'm over here. That should have been me. And she looks happy, and I see all my high school friends still going to college, and some of them about to graduate, barely probably getting engaged, and they looked happy. How am I going to confide and tell them? Yeah. My life is horrible.
Did you get married? Yes. I know you were engaged, so you got married after?
I was engaged, and I didn't get married until 2002. Mm-hmm. We ended up going to the courthouse and getting married. Mm-hmm. And then I got pregnant with my second son. Mm-hmm. You'd think, why would you go get pregnant? Mm-hmm. That was my life. Yeah. That was my life. Don't get me wrong. There was probably good moments, But as much as there was good moments, there was horrible moments.
And it's like they always say, sometimes whenever you go through something, we tend to remember the negative. The negative will cover up some of those good times. Yes, you go through all these things, and I'm sure the birth of your kids, those are all happy moments of feeling blessed and joyful, right? But then you think of the negative, and you see it as a season where you see those negative things.
Yeah. Like they overshadow.
There you go, that's the word.
Yeah, they overshadow, and making sure I shielded my kids from things, so I would make everything for them as happy as I could.
Yeah.
And little did I know, my oldest saw, unfortunately, some of these incidents. And I think my middle son saw some, but not really. He was still small. But I knew that wasn't life.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that till I was hanging out with a group of people, and they were single. And somebody mentioned abuse and how they left that relationship. And mind you, one of the reasons why I also never left was because I was threatened, if you leave, I take away your kid. Thinking, how much right would you have to take away? Now I know better.
Yeah.
But at that time, you grew up in this household, you're a teen, and these people have money, they have means. I grew up poor. They probably will take away my kids.
Yeah. You felt you lacked the power that they had.
I lacked power. I felt shame. You name it.
Yeah.
It was written all over me.
Yeah.
But I was also very good at hiding.
Yeah.
You'd probably see me at work and I'd be like, I have the best life ever.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
I feel like there's always that stigma of women whenever they're having a situation where there's domestic violence, that the easy thing for the outsider is, why don't you just get out of it? Right? Why don't you just walk away? Yeah. And I feel like there's so much more from the person on the inside, the person that's living it, that you feel bound to this person or staying in the situation, that it's not just as easy as, let me just walk out and, you know.
It would be easier said than done. And when I confided in this person, my friend, who's a good friend of mine to this day, who shared previous experience, and in her own words would be like, you don't have to be putting up with that. Call the cops. You just name it. Probably the advice you'd give somebody that's going through it. And I was like, I can't. And here I go feeling I should be the one that people should be defending, and I'm over here defending his actions. And then I tell his mom, I just can't anymore. He needs to change. I'm done. And I would leave. And here I come back again. And so many times I'm like, I can't. I don't love you anymore. The abuse was just so much that I couldn't. But then there comes abuse. Imagine telling somebody you don't love them anymore. They're going to keep abusing you. Yeah. When my friends, I called her one time and I was calling his mom, come. And they lived 2 houses down from where we lived at that time. And I was like, come get your son. He's crazy right now. He's not well. And I think I had my son, who's a toddler, my middle son. He was chasing me with our car. And I'm over here running in the back. We had 3 acres of land. And I'm over here trying to run, trying to go to his mom's house to come and help. Nobody was answering me. At that time, we had cell phones already. I told my oldest son, go to their grandpa's house. Go tell them to come. I need help.
Yeah.
And so they didn't. And all I could do at that time was call the cops. That was my only escape.
Was that your first time calling the cops?
That was the first time. And I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't because of my friend. She gave me that willpower, that strength that no one else had given me. And again, I hadn't confided in anybody.
Yeah. This time comes around, your mom still doesn't know anything that's going on.
No.
Your family's clueless.
Yeah, I think
you're hiding it pretty well.
I'm hiding it pretty well. And if somebody saw something on me, I'd be, I was sick. And the reason I say sick, because I would break out because of crying and stuff. I get the little things. So I say I was sick and throwing up. But he was smart enough to hide the bruises. They were on other areas of my body, and I just hide them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something that was noticeable on my face constantly. The crying and hyperventilating. I hyperventilate a lot. If something dramatic happens to me, that's just how I've been all the time. And so I break out into those little things. I don't know what they're called, but
petechiae.
There you go. I knew you would know that. And then so I was just hiding it, and then she didn't answer, and I thought I would have their support, because remember, they were always my support, because my mom wasn't.
They were the ones telling you forgive him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's in jail. This is where I find out later that he has a warrant because of a previous domestic issue. He has a history, and this is where I find out about the other person and all this stuff.
And this is how many years into the marriage?
My middle son was probably 2 or 3, so maybe 2004 or 5, and we've been together since 97, 98.
Yeah, so you've known him a while.
Yeah, already a while of abuse. And I finally call the cops, and they take him. He can't get out because of all these situations. So his family gets a lawyer. His mom is very different with me now. Why did I do that? Why didn't you call? I was like, I did.
Yeah.
I
The
tried
loyalty
calling.
starts to show.
Yes.
Right.
So it's really like, it's never what was best for me, but what was best for them and their family. And I can tell you, she's an amazing lady. It's different now.
Right.
I can tell you, when I got a divorce, it wasn't, I just divorced him. It's like I divorced the whole family. They all felt it.
And I feel like right now that you mentioned about how she started defending him, it was no longer about you. And then right after you said, but she's an amazing person, right? I feel like there's something to be said about that. People can be good people, but make mistakes.
Yes.
I mean, we have made mistakes. We are all sinners. We have all done things at some point in our life that it's out of character, maybe, or it's maybe not showing the best side of us. But there's always potential for change. There's always potential for growth if you're willing and open to see that. Sometimes people can think, well, I can never change. It's just how I am.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a lie that you tell yourself. That's the lie that the enemy tells you, that this is just the way you are. You're just an angry person. For me, it was, you're just an emotional person, Flor. And it's like, well, yes, I can be an emotional person. There's nothing wrong with that. But do I need to always react out of emotion? Same thing as somebody with anger or somebody that is abusive. People can still come out of that and be good people, right? Yeah. Especially if you're taking it and talking to God about it. He can change you.
And I always prayed for that. I'd say, God, why me? Help him or change him. Yeah. I would pray to God, can you change the situation? I strongly believe this is who I was going to grow old with. And that's where his mom was like, she's always loved me as a daughter. She knew I took care of her son very well. And she knew also that I was also abused. At that point, when this situation happened, of course, they're going to do everything to get him out of jail and stuff. He was there for 3 months. And I was at our house. We had built a house together. And I was there with the kids doing everything. His mom owned a daycare, so I would drop off the kids. But I still felt the cold shoulder. Why did you do this? They wanted me to drop the charges, and I couldn't anymore. It was something the state writes when it comes to domestic violence. Even if I go drop it, I decide after the fact. But I went to do it for the kid's sake, for him to get out. So he gets out and thinking he's going to change, because he tells me, I'm going to change. It's going to be different. Months pass, and it's not the physical abuse as much, but it's the verbal abuse and the name calling never changed. Yeah. There was instances where he went back again to do something. He was either drinking, and when he was drinking, it was the worst. I would probably try to avoid him as much as I could, because
you would already foresee what could happen in those situations, and so you would avoid it.
Yeah, I would probably stay in the restroom till he knocked out, or just not bother him. And one time I made the worst mistake ever. I woke him up so he can eat and probably sober up. Oh, the worst. I shouldn't have done that. Yeah, the worst. I think he put me in the closet and was hurting me with a hanger and abusing me. And
during this time, are you still going to that little church or like those areas?
I would go occasionally to, even when he was in jail, I would go so he can get out and be different. That's where I was praying. I would put a prayer card, get a candle, if you all have ever been to a shrine, and pray. And so he got out. So I believe San Juditas, like St. Jude,
helped
and
you.
God, were helping me. Yeah. And so we go back to life, and then again he starts. So I leave again. My friend had this house for rent, and he had it available. Can I go? I left him again. He comes back. There were so many instances throughout that relationship that I always left, and he was either there where I was living at and came back to, come on, I'm going to change. It was always that.
To this day, if we move forward to the present time, do you feel that he's a bad person?
I don't think that he's a bad person. I think that he had demons, and those demons came from drug abuse and alcohol abuse. If he would have gotten the help, maybe he would have changed. But I don't know that. He's also the type of machismo, you don't do that. But he is a good person. When he was good and not on anything.
I was thinking about how it says in the Bible about how our battle is not with the flesh, our battle is with the spirit. And I think for anybody that struggled with alcoholism or drug abuse or anything like that, your body, your flesh gets taken over by a spiritual, like a demon, and then that changes the person. And so our battle as humans is not with people, with the flesh. It's with what lives freely in the world, right? Because there's stories of people that come to God and change their entire life. Like I was mentioning earlier about how people change. People that maybe did things that were not great when they were under the influence, but came to God, God saves them, God changes them. And sometimes people see those people again and it's like, wow, it's a whole different person, right?
Yeah. And it's good that you bring that up. I think at one point he said someone has done or have tried to do something, and this is the black magic. They call it brujeria.
Yeah.
He's gone with ladies. That's where I had been introduced probably when I was younger, because my aunt used to read cards and stuff. I knew there was brujeria, and then you go get limpiezas and all that. I knew of it. When he was going through that, I think we would see this lady and would give him the limpieza. And so he took some things to stop drinking, stop doing stuff. And I mean, we were together for 15 years. Moments of things work or don't, but they would go back again. At that one time, my kids were a little older. My daughter was 4. I told him, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't love you, even if we try.
Yeah.
Even if he hadn't abused me already for quite some time, I just knew that I was in this relationship as a costumbre, and it wasn't life. I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
I was seeing so many people. Now social media is in play, and you start reconnecting with people from school, and you see their lives, and I'm like, they look happy. But again,
it's a highlight reel, right? Because how many years did you go putting a face, like you mentioned? Maybe there was no social media back then, but there are so many things that we struggle with on a daily that we can definitely hide that from other people because we feel they're going to judge us. We're going to feel the guilt. We're going to feel shame. We're going to feel whatever it is. And it's much easier to hide things than to be vulnerable and open about things to get the help.
But that's where my eyes were opened in a different, like, you work with people, so it wasn't like because I've seen situations where people are abused and they don't have a place where they go work or have community with other people.
Yeah.
So they're literally sheltered in just their home and abused and can't share or speak up. But here I go, I work for companies and I build relationships with people, friendships with people, and I still was guarded to
Did you
who
feel
I would share.
A sense of anything when you shared for the first time with your friend that had a situation?
I felt a sense of relief, and I also cried, but I also was scared.
Yeah.
All of that in one.
Scared because he had threatened it in the past about you.
Or scared that I could never leave. She's telling me you can, all this and that, but then you're thinking what's going to happen with your kids.
Yeah.
You're going to be a single mom. Can I provide for my kids? Yes, I worked. It wasn't like I was just a housewife and then he's my only source of support. It wasn't that way, but it was more of the shame. What are people going to think?
Yeah.
Here I'm putting a facade that everything's nice
Fine
and dandy. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
even with my family, my cousins, they thought everything was nice and dandy. Little do they know it's not.
Yeah. I feel like obviously we have very different lives and the way we were brought up and everything. But even for me, the shame of feeling anxious and depressed when I was a teenager, I didn't feel like I could go talk to my mom or my dad about that, because when I did try for the first time, it was pushed off, and it wasn't out of bad intention for my parents. They just didn't know how to deal with that, you know, kind of how your mom reacted with you being pregnant. It's not that she doesn't love you, but she doesn't know how to deal with it. Sometimes what we do is we brush it aside. And then as the one going through it, it almost like, well, if that's her reaction, then what's everybody else's reaction going to be? So I'd rather just keep it to myself and hide it. And everybody else thinks that life is great and that you're doing so well, but little do they know the struggles. I feel like it needs to be said because it's real easy now with social media. We see what everybody else goes through. Celebrities.
Yeah.
We think that, oh my gosh, that person, they have all this money and look at all these wonderful things. But we forget that these are humans that have things that happen to them.
It's life.
And life is gonna life, right? Yeah. It is such a hard thing to do on your own. Everybody has something going on, and you never know how what you say to somebody can impact their life positively or negatively. Yeah. I feel like that's one thing as a mom that I've been really trying to talk to my boys a lot about. Not so much my daughter, just because she's too little still, but I feel especially with my oldest, I really try to talk about kindness, because sometimes you may have a kid that is being told, oh, they're the bully. Yet we don't know the story of the kid that's being a bully. Maybe they're acting that way, especially as children. They're acting that way as a way to compensate for something else that's going on in their life. You know, whether that's maybe they are getting abused at home.
They're trying to get attention.
I just really wanted to mention that, 'cause especially now with social media as adults, it's so easy to compare your life to other people. or to hide what you're really feeling because you don't want other people to know what you're going through because of that shame, that fear of feeling judged and all of that. And so now you get to this point that you're getting real tired of everything.
Yeah, I have a conversation with him, and I think he's okay at that point that I'm done, because I say the words, I don't love you anymore. But he doesn't want me to leave him, of course. I don't. This is not life. And I was like, let's talk to my oldest. So we talked to our oldest, and my oldest doesn't take it well. So that gave me, like, I'm really big on signs.
Yeah.
And before, it wasn't signs of God is giving me that sign. It was just like a sign that I shouldn't do this. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a try. We talked. At this time, it's a lot more peaceful now. He can have conversations. He's talking and not abusing me. And so we're like, let's give it a try. We give it a try, and then he does something, and then I'm like, he's never going to change. I was going to give it a try because of Mijo, and no, I'm done. I tell him I'm done. Let's just sell the house. We put it for sale. We'll wait, and we live life in the same household separately. I'm going to do me. You do you. We come to a common ground where if you're going to take care of the kids, you do this with them and I do this with them while we're trying to sell this house. Yeah. But we knew that it was over. And then fast forward to New Year's Eve. It was 2013. And we're not together, but we're spending holidays, everything like the norm until we sell this house, and then we tell the kids separate ways. But the kids can already see we're not together. Yeah. There's no kissing, hugging. There's none of that going on. Affection. And so the kids all decided to stay at their grandma's house. And she lived like at the corner, like maybe 5 minutes away. Didn't live that far. And so we go home probably about 1 or so. And then I get a call. It's his mom crying hysterically. But I couldn't barely understand what she was saying. I pass it over to him. And then he's like, let's go, let's go. And I remember he gets a windbreaker type of thing, doesn't put a shirt on, just zips it up. We leave because he says the house is on fire. And I'm like, all my 3 kids are there. Oh my goodness. I could barely understand. And we go, she already had taken, by the time we get there, all the 3 kids, actually 4, because my niece was there too. They're all outside. The house is in flames. We're waiting for the fire department to get there. I'm sure there's so many fires or things because it's New Year's Eve, and you know how it gets here. And he goes in there trying to put the fire out. I don't know how it happens or what, but something fell. One of the barrotes, one of the things fall on him, and he inhales the fumes. He's burned. The jacket he was wearing is stuck to him. He refuses to go to the hospital. But they tell him he was in there for quite some time and inhaled. And they need to rush him to the San Antonio Burn Center. And he's there. At that time, his mom also goes with me. The kids are fine. Everyone's fine. The house is burned to the ground. We're over there, and I just start feeling these sense of maybe this is a sign.
Of a good breakaway?
No.
Is that what you mean?
No. A sign that I should go back.
Oh, okay.
We should make this work.
Yeah. He needs me.
He needs me. Yeah, that was my mentality. I didn't know why I was thinking that. I just knew that's what I was thinking. Yeah. So we get back. All this passes. His mom comes and stays with us because she has no house, and she's taking it very hard. She built that house. Her work is in there. Yeah. She didn't have insurance for the house. It was going to take a while to rebuild everything and all this stuff. So she's there. My husband at that time then takes it to heart and goes back to drinking. He just reverts backwards. And that was it. Yeah. There's no going back. I was done. I thought I was going to make it work. And then I'm like, no, this isn't going to work. We're done. You're never going to change. I can tell you, I never in my life would think I would be married again. That was never my intention. I wanted to just be by myself with my kids, provide for them, live life on my terms, go out, have fun. And I did that. Yeah. And this person comes around who is wanting to go out with me. And I was talking to people. I was enjoying life, going out with my friends. And I was like, well, you can be my friend if you want to. We can go out and have fun, but I'm not really interested in a relationship. I literally saw every guy the same. Although I see social media people this story, but again, I also know they're not putting their whole story because I was doing the same thing. So I'm just like, we'll never get married again. I will never have a relationship. Can I go out and have fun? Yeah, why not? I can tell you it was not a good season of my life. It was not honoring God either. But I basically experienced life that I hadn't experienced before because I was in a tough situation. But I also knew that wasn't my life. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
you knew that deep down that really wasn't you?
that really wasn't me. I love to go out, but I would love to go out with somebody, be in a relationship with somebody, but someone that's going to treat me right. But then I was scared that someone was going to treat me even worse or the same. I felt no one was going to be able to treat me how I thought. And I thought it was just in fairy tales.
This stuff doesn't really happen.
This stuff doesn't happen, especially in our culture. Not possible. I just continued going out, doing things that probably weren't the best thing for me to do. And I was very confused because I kept thinking some signs, as I'm telling you, in that season of my life. I started dating just this one guy, and I told him, don't fall in love with me. We're just going to be friends. We're just going to go out. And I don't want to get married. Well, he didn't want that.
He had other plans.
He had other plans. And I felt it, and I would test him. He's just, giving me the moon and the stars, and it's going to be whatever when we get, if I were to get married with him. And I just didn't take him seriously in the beginning. And then I guess one thing led to another, and I started catching feelings. I started catching feelings. At this moment, I was already living on my own. I hadn't introduced my kids to anybody, but they knew that I was going out. I was talking at one point to several people and going out and with my friends and things like that, but it wasn't anything serious, as I mentioned. But then this guy was more serious. And I was still persistent. Yes, everything. And it was somebody that I worked with. He was there all the time. And I remember in the beginning, I was like, just don't look at me. I was at this level of the company and how people are going to see me like that person, right? So our relationship gets serious. We date for 6 months. And okay, I think it's time for me to tell my kids, this is my friend. I introduce him as a friend first. And then obviously they see him come around more, and it's more serious. And again, never thinking I'm going to get married again. Just, this is someone that I'm probably going to be spending time with. He lived with his mom at that point because he had gotten separated too. He was living with his mom and his brother. And so I would see him. Sometimes I didn't want my kids to know I'm with this guy. So I would sneak around with him. It was if I was sneaking from my parents, but it was for my kids. And so things just became serious. And obviously we end up being together, having a relationship. And he always had the intention of asking me to marry him. Obviously, I fell in love with him as he fell in love with me. And he gave me the moon and the stars. That's the man that I would probably picture when I was going through abuse. That's what I wanted to be treated like. You know what I mean? But I wasn't treated that way. And I thought I would never be treated that way. And I would always...
Did you feel like you weren't worthy of a relationship like that?
I probably felt that way. And then because then I was doing things too that weren't
God honoring.
God honoring. And so I felt no one's ever gonna
no one's ever gonna love me the way that I
deserve. And then I thought too, maybe I don't deserve to be loved that way, because I did all these things. I got pregnant at a young age. These are just,
I don't deserve it.
I learned to live with things like that or think things like that.
And I think we can fall into that, especially before you get to know God. You fall into these situations where you feel like, well, this is just it. This is just my life. That's how it's going to be. Like for me, it was, I guess this is how all men are going to treat me. I guess I'm just going to be anxious and depressed. It can happen with so many things, right? And so many of our lives, regardless of your situation, sometimes you get to the point where you feel, I guess this is it.
You know what's funny that you mentioned that? From all the situations, and people probably think you would be depressed, feeling anxious, like sobbing all the time. And I can't tell you that any moment of my life during everything that I've experienced, and I've experienced so many different things, that I never have felt depressed or anxious. And not that I have never, just in those situations, but I have felt it in situations that involve my kids and finances, which is a totally different subject. But it's funny to think that some people do go through that when it comes to relationships through abuse. And I was just good at hiding it, that it didn't affect me in that sense.
And I mean, it just, tells you just how everybody's built differently. Sometimes what we may consider anxiety or depression, somebody else may not think that it's that, but maybe they are dealing with it. Some people are just built to where they're very strong-willed. Like you mentioned earlier, you always were very strong and just very sure of yourself and stuff like that. Everybody is going to be so different.
So we started living life together, and I think we were dating for months and months. And then I'm like, come move in. I had my own place. He lived with his mom. Just move in. I'll talk to the kids. And so I talked to the kids, and we started living life together. He did say he wanted to get married with me, and I was like, oh, okay. And he had a child with someone else. He also wasn't going to ask me to marry him until I was divorced, and the kids took a long time, 2 years or more. Yeah. That's because I had to tell his mom, tell him he needs to sign this. Yeah. And so finally I'm divorced, and he asked me to marry him, and of course I said yes. It was everything, even living together, and I felt that's what I needed to test him. Yeah. And that's funny to say that, but I was testing who this man was through the dating process, because someone can probably be a certain person while you're dating, but then things change when you live with them, which is also not honoring God. But I felt this was something that at that point in my life, I needed to do. I would always tell him, and it's funny, like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you in the relationship you were before? Right. If you're this person, like, to me, in my eyes, I felt he was a good person. There wasn't anything wrong with him. Yeah. Except one thing. And that was dun, dun, dun. And that's because he was very jealous. And you think, oh, jealousy is not a bad thing. But he was just very jealous and very insecure that I was going to leave him. And one of those instances was that I was going to leave him to go back with my kid's dad. And I would always have to tell him, why would I? Yeah. I left. I shared with you everything that I lived. Why would I even think about going back? While we were dating and stuff, continued our relationship, I started feeling a little uneasy of my feelings. I was second guessing what I was doing with this person. And then what did I just do? Getting divorced and separated. And I started seeing a lady that would read me my card. And because I was feeling the depressed, and I never felt that before. Yeah. As I mentioned right now, the only times in my life that I felt depressed or anxious was because of financial situations that I couldn't control, right, or my children that I couldn't control, and situations they were going through. So when I started feeling this about a man, what's up with that? I went to this lady, and she's telling me someone did something to you. And also my ex's mom, when I was telling her how I was feeling, because I'm telling you that she's a good lady, she said, a ti te hicieron algo. I will tell you that I felt the worst I've ever felt in my life. I had left work and I was on the expressway, and I just wanted to fly off. Wow. That's crazy. I had never in my life had those kind of thoughts. Never. Why are those thoughts in my mind? So I believed that something was wrong. And I went with the lady. And she tells me, yes, someone did something to you. And then my husband, who hasn't been my husband yet, and not even engaged at that time.
The guy you're dating.
The guy I'm dating. She's like, oh my, her freak out. And I freaked out. Her reading my cards. And she's like, no. Like, that was her reaction. So imagine someone telling you that. And she's... She's trying to get stuff from you, right? Like, who is this person? Is he your boyfriend? And I'm just like, yeah, it's someone I'm dating. Oh, you think it's bad? But she tells me, I've never seen this on a card. This man loves you. You're his everything. He is obsessively in love with you. That's how she said it in Spanish. That she had never seen that. And I'm just like, you'd think I'd believe what she told me, but okay, whatever. So he loves me. That was just my thing. Again, I'm still a wall from what I experienced before, but I knew that I loved him because the way he treated me, the way he made me feel, I never felt before. What I was stuck at was that someone did something to me. So she's like, do this and that. Go buy this. Go buy that. So I thought it was somebody that my ex was dating. I thought she was saying that it was her doing something to me. So I do everything that she tells me to do so I can clean myself. I think she had me shower with some liquids and stuff and then turn on candles. And I remember I had a little shed in the back. I turned on the candles there. But later I would freak out. I was like, what if the shed would have gone on fire? It was like I had all the candles there and stuff. So that practice of me going with this lady when something wasn't going right is who I would go with. And then that became your new thing. It became my new thing. So it wasn't anymore about going to St. Jude and turning on a candle. It was this lady that's telling me my future and what I need to do to fix things that are going bad.
She's telling me what's happening now.
Yeah. Tell me what's going on now and how I should fix it, because all these things were going bad for me. And then my husband, I'm telling him he's not my husband yet, but all this is going on. And he happened to have an account linked when he had his daughter, and something with his Gmail linked up with what his ex had. And there's a message on Facebook he gets. I guess the notifications are synced. And I think at that time, Facebook would send an email. Oh, yeah. So he gets the email, and she's messaging with an aunt that she has in Mexico that does witchcraft. Oh, wow. And on that witchcraft, it says things that are going to be done to my husband. Wow. Who's not my husband yet. Yeah. Could it be that things were done to us, that there's evil? I believe
Absolutely.
so. We experienced things that I had never experienced.
Yeah.
Obviously, she wanted me out of his life. They wanted him not to have a good life. But the lady that I was going with that would tell me and read me these cards would say they're trying to separate. And I always thought it was my ex. And we were doing all these things for that. But it wasn't that. It was, somebody else interfering with our relationship and doing all these things. And my husband confronted her, and if you do anything, tells her all this stuff, because she thought they would also have the similar relationship of leave, come back. He would always return, but he also wasn't happy. He would be there for his daughter. He was never married or anything. They just had a relationship and their daughter. And this, a custom, my husband and I were going through this. Then we started having issues with my son, my middle son. And things aren't getting worse. I'm telling you, when I felt the depressed, it's because it's things that affect my kids. And here I go. I don't even want to do anything. I'm stuck in bed. And we're still going with this lady. Then they recommend us with this other lady. You have to go at midnight. And
More powers.
every month. It has to be at midnight from the first of the month. And leaves and branches of certain, probably like Palo Santo, all these things to cleanse you. It was never anything bad. It was just to clean me.
Yeah.
And that was just the custom. Every month, my husband and I would go.
Rituals.
And then we would turn on candles also. She would tell us to turn on certain candles for this and that. And here we are planning, getting married. We're doing the same thing, having issues. We're doing all these things. And tell me if things are getting better. No, things aren't getting better. Fast forward, we're married, still doing this ritual that becomes our daily life. Our day-to-day candle turned on. Make sure they don't turn off the first of the month. You go, and then you have to go dump the whatever she cleaned you with. She put it in a Ziploc bag. It has to be thrown in a corner street.
That's crazy. I've never heard of anything.
But if you ever see in a street something thrown in a plastic bag or things, it's probably that.
Wow.
And you're supposed to throw it right after you get the cleanse. So you're there with that lady at midnight and she has a line of people.
Wow.
Getting cleaned. And so it's the 31st of, I can't remember, my husband knows the date specifically, but I can't remember. But we had a nutrition club at that time, and we were going to go get the scale from one of our friends' house. And we get there, and she's like, oh, I forgot, it's in the car that's in the shop. And I was like, we went there for nothing, right? But we started chatting. And they were asking us, what are you guys doing? Do you want some coffee or tea? We drink tea, and we got to go. We tell her, thinking it's a normal thing, we're going to go get a limpia. We have to be there by midnight. She's like, what? What are you going to go do?
But it was norm for you to be like, vamos a la limpia.
Sí.
Yeah.
With certain, not just with her, people that I felt comfortable with, that I had a relationship with. So I felt comfortable to tell her, we're going to go with this lady because she knew the situations we had been going through with Joe's ex, with my kids, overall in general. And so her husband's like, my pastor told me a couple was going to come and I needed to counsel them and that
divine intervention.
Yes. And I've been contemplating who that couple is, and you're just sharing where you're going.
Yeah.
You're that couple that's going through these situations. And we were there for all this time. We missed the midnight, and we gave ourselves to Christ with him there.
Wow.
He read the whole, I never thought what it was. Now, what I was thinking after we gave ourselves to Christ, you thought, like, I did feel something. Don't get me wrong. But I still felt we missed going to.
Yeah, you have the fear of
we didn't go.
Yeah.
Things are going to go bad. So I still had that thing. And remember, I've mentioned, like, I believe strongly in signs. Before it was the signs of what's going to happen. Now it's the signs of God. God gives me signs in different ways. Through people, through things, through situations. So at that point, we passed. It's already the 1st or 2nd of the month.
Yeah.
We're asleep. My husband used to work from home for Apple. So his Mac, it was in our office, would be in our bedroom. He would turn it off. Once he wasn't working, he worked the night shift. So if he wasn't working, it'd be shut off completely. He would never use it just for work. And so it's late and we get woken up. It was 4 a.m. And I'm contemplating, obviously all these days have passed, that we didn't go with a lady. Now we have to wait a whole month and probably things are going to happen. Obviously I gave myself to Christ, but what does that mean? There wasn't any directions after of what to do.
I feel a lot of us what are we supposed to do now?
Yeah, what's next, right?
Sometimes it's easy to just fall back into your old ways when there's no guidance.
Next steps.
Yeah, there's no guidance, or there's not, especially if you don't have a friend that is a Christ follower, somebody that already knows God. It's really easy to be like, okay, well, I'm just going to go back to my life. Yeah.
That's the way I felt. So and my friend didn't give us like, hey, join me on this or that, right? So we're asleep It's 3 or 4 in the morning and we hear this music playing. And he thought it was the boys' room was right across, and we thought, oh, they're making noise. Yeah. They're not asleep, and they should be asleep. So he goes and checks. They're all asleep. Everyone's asleep. He's going, where is that noise coming from? It's in here, babe. It's in our room. Something is on. He moves his Mac, and it turns on, and YouTube is playing. And it's the song Unstoppable God. Mind you, we hadn't... Yeah. Like, this wasn't our everyday. It's elevation worship, Unstoppable. And it's just playing, like, Unstoppable God. That was my sign. Oh, wow. That was like, okay, we need to do something. We would see people post about Palm Valley, and we knew that we didn't want to go to a Catholic church. That's because my husband and I got married through the Catholic church. So, fast forward... we go to Palm Valley Church, and believe you me, I'm sure a lot of people that are skeptical and thinking, I've invited so many people, but they probably felt uncomfortable. Where do I go? It's this big building, and what do people do inside, right? It doesn't look like your traditional church. Right. And so we just went. We found out a lot of our friends would go, like, yeah, go. We didn't go with anybody. They would say to go, so we went. So we go to a service, we take all our kids with us, and we're there. And it just so happened that the day we go, the pastor does the, if you've been struggling and you want to give yourselves, all of us, give ourselves to Christ. And that felt different. That to me was, besides the worship music, that I just felt I was bawling. I also didn't understand the people worshiping and their hands raised.
I was about to ask, do you remember the first time going into the church? I remember the first time, I'm getting goosebumps. I remember going the first time to Palm Valley. Was the first church that I went to that was not a Catholic church. And I remember going in and I was like, okay, where do I put my hand? Because everybody's like worshiping, and that was such a new thing for me to put my hands up. And to be honest with you, I mean, even in the beginning, it took me a while to get the courage to like raise my hands. I always loved the music, so it wasn't hard for me to sing the songs or whatever, but I remember thinking, these people are weird. And I mean, now there's a whole deeper meaning for it when you realize why people worship. And it's not really the song, it's the worship, right, of God. And there's such a deeper connection now that I'm like, yes, I want to raise my hands up to you.
People do it at concerts. Why wouldn't you do it to worship God?
Right. Yeah, no. And I just wanted to point that out, because I feel like anything that's new, you feel like you're an outsider, but you have to push past the uncomfortable weirdness. Just be open. I think that's the biggest thing. If you're going in there being open to, hey, let me see what I can experience from this, that's when true change happens. God sees your heart, and he is present. At Palm Valley, God is present every time. He is there. The pastor has such a great way of speaking that you're going to get a message at one point or another that you're literally going to feel like, that message was for me. Yeah. And I feel even what you mentioned earlier about how, the friend said a couple's going to come in here. Those are literally divine appointments. Yeah. Probably in things that have happened in the past, never really saw that. But when you start seeing how God works, you will see that there's divine appointments. Us having coffee, I'm getting goosebumps. Us having coffee the first time, I had been praying for me to have a friend that was a Christ follower. I had gone through a situation a week before from somebody that it wasn't really my friend. It was more of an acquaintance. But I had been praying, God, bring me a friend that follows you, that knows you, that has a heart for you. And I remember also praying, please remove people out of my life that don't need to be there. Yeah. And I mentioned to you that day that we met at coffee, I was like, he Amazon Primed it. He literally, from one day to another, God removing that person out of my life. Yeah. But then not only did he remove that, but then he brought you and another friend to my life within a week from each other.
He does amazing things.
Yeah. And we've known each other for a long time.
We've been messaging on
social media, right? But it goes back to, if you have an open heart to receive blessings and to see those signs from God, you will see them, but you have to be open and able to receive them. If I had met my husband years prior to meeting him, I probably would have treated him like all the other guys, because I wasn't ready to receive a blessing, right? Yeah, God's timing is everything. Divine appointments are a real true thing. That person talking to you and you being open to that. And even though the next day, like you mentioned, we didn't go to our midnight appointment, you know, but you received it. You were open to receive it. And so many times at church, they will have those, you know, at the end of the service, they'll say, if you want to give your life to Christ and if you want to receive him, they'll do that prayer in a lot of the services. Don't fight that feeling, being open to it. Sometimes we're just resistant to it because we have so much pride
and control.
And we want to control it, right? We're like, I don't need God. I can do this on my own. I can deal with whatever it is, a broken marriage or sexual immorality, all of that stuff. I can do it on my own. I'll get myself out of it. But if you're just open to receive things and open to God and open to situations, your life can change.
Yes,
you know, your life can change.
And it's not always butterflies and rainbows.
No.
I can tell you, every time I bring something to God, just like you said, it's not on my time. And although we want to Amazon Prime it. And sometimes he will, sometimes he won't.
And sometimes he just won't answer that prayer at all.
Sometimes, and we just don't know why. But what we do have to make sure that we stay is faithful and still reading his word. And I've done so many things to bring myself to understand more, right? And at the beginning, if I would have not gone to church, because we would do also the online, you know, with certain pastors like Stephen Furtick, T.D. Jakes. Those are all good pastors, but I felt different when you're in his house.
And that's what God wants. God wants you to be part of the church. You should be the part of the body of Christ. God wants you to have fellowship. God wants all those things. When you're new, you don't understand that. I didn't understand that for like 10 years that I was going to the church. I felt part of the habit, right? Of like, I go to church every Sunday, but then I go party, right? You know what I mean? It's so easy to fall back to it.
But like I did my Sunday duty of going to church.
But God wants all of you. God wants your heart. God wants you to worship him. He is the one and the only. He's a creator. He made all these things that you like. He created them. All God wants is you. He just wants you. He just wants you. He wants you wholeheartedly. And until we realize that, it is really easy to be worrying about our midnight ritual. Because at that point you weren't seeing it like that. And that journey to get to where we are now, right? It's a journey. Like you said, it's not just because you give your life to Christ and just because you say, I believe in God, doesn't mean that your life is not going to have ups and downs. I think that's a super common thing. We are not holier than thou.
No.
We continue to make mistakes every day.
Yes, we are human.
We are human. Like I mentioned earlier, we are fighting. The battle is not with the flesh. The battle is in the spiritual realm. There is an enemy that prowls around that wants to come in and separate you from that relationship with God. And if we continue to leave those doors and those windows open, he's going to come in. The only way to fight that is through reading the word and continuing having a relationship with God, going and being part of the church, finding friends that
in community,
right? All of those things are how we should be doing life. The enemy will come in. There will be times that you fall back into sin, but it's about remembering again, he is the creator. He is the one that made all these things. He just wants your heart, you know?
Yes. I feel like the sermon from this week is perfectly said with that. It's the uninvited guest. And
those thoughts, those feelings.
We're human. And obviously, if we're not consistent with reading the Bible or listening to sermons or his word at church, we're going to stray back. I can easily just go back. And I can tell you, I fought those feelings for quite some time. So even when I gave myself and I felt different at church, you know, I still had that feeling we need to go. It still continued until slowly I was reading and understanding and going to church and listening to the sermons that I felt like, that's not life.
And like God doesn't want you to dwell on the past. It's like how you can have this conversation about what happened in your life. You can have that conversation because he's removed the shame and the guilt from it. You have asked God for forgiveness. You don't hold any unforgiveness in your heart towards your ex, right?
No.
Same thing with me. I feel for a long time. I mean, up to probably recently, if I'm being super honest, there was a lot of hurt that I had that I was carrying with me because I kept looking back. I kept looking back at the things that had happened in my life and blaming those things, and why I was this way, it was because of those things. I was holding on to that. I had forgiven them, but I hadn't asked God to help me forgive myself and to help me get rid of the shame. I think I carried shame for a long time. And now I feel if somebody were to ask me, Lord, what happened? I don't think that I would cry because I feel like you now, where you're at a point where that happened to me, but look what God did. If he did it for me, he can do it for you. And I think that I want to end on that message, right? When you are going through something, whether you went through something in your past, if you're going through something now, at the end of the day, God just wants you. He wants your heart. You need to humble yourself and know that you can't do it alone. God is just there willing and waiting for you. And it's not going to be easy. It is going to be ups and downs. The enemy's going to want to come in and get you where he knows it's your weakness. This literally continues to happen to me. Just in the past week, there's things that I feel are an easy target for me, and the enemy will come and target that, right? And I'm sure you can speak for things on your own that you know that if it's your weakness, and if the enemy knows that's your weakness, he's going to attack there.
That's the uninvited guest.
That's the uninvited guest, exactly. At the end of the day, God loves you. God wants the best for you. It is not always going to be easy, but life is so much easier to do with God than without him. Yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I'm going to have to bring Gina back, but I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Thank you for being here with me and for being my first podcast guest. Yay. But as always, I hope that this message blessed you. If you have any questions, any comments or anything, please leave them below. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. DM me on social media. I will tag her social media accounts like that. You guys can follow her because she's doing amazing things on her own as well. But yeah, we'll see you guys at the next one.